really excited to be here with you all tonight and to talk about our subject. I am going to be sharing my screen, so just bear. Well, actually, Kirsten, are you willing to enable me to share the screen?
Yeah, sorry about that. You should be good to go.
Thank you. Okay. So, Rachel. Let's see here. I think this is, yep, there we go. Can everybody see this okay? Okay, I got some nods. So I really appreciate that nonverbal feedback. Very helpful. So again, I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight. We're going to be talking about resilience and stress. The two have a really closely connected relationship, and we're going to learn quite a bit about that tonight as we get through this time together. A little bit about myself, so you know, like, who is this person coming in here talking to us? Well, first of all, my name is Dr. Olivia Gratz, but I much prefer being called Olivia, so please call me Olivia. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a health psychology fellow at the UW hospitals and clinics. So again, thank you very much for your time tonight. And any questions about any of that before we get started? Okie dokie. So for tonight, my goal for tonight, and I would love to hear any goals that you all have, is to learn about what impacts how resilient we are, and therefore talk about ways we can collaboratively build our resilience. And then I am sure you all have been doing a bunch of things that you may or may not have realized already that actually impact your resilience level. And then maybe think about some strategies that you can use from here moving forward to help with your resilience. Okay. Does anybody have any goals for tonight that they were really hoping we talk about, or that would really mean a lot to them that I didn't name in tonight's goal? Okay. And if anybody does think about a goal that they would like to have for tonight, please just let me know. Feel free to just unmute yourself and interrupt. That's totally fine.
There was a chat.
Thank you.
Building and sustaining resilience, and that's a great way to get messages into without interrupting. So
yeah, thank you,
Christine, and thank you, everybody. Yeah,
I am going to actually pull that up so that I can see that during the talk. It was not coming up for me, so thank you so much for letting me know about that. I'm going to make sure I keep an eye on that chat. Okay. So common challenges that come up specifically as it relates to health concerns are, one, really worrying about my health or your health, and will I beat the cancer? Will the cancer come back? Potentially, will another form of cancer come around? And associated with having these medical challenges are, how do I talk about what's going on? How do I talk about it maybe with my kids or with my spouse or my partner? How do I talk about it with my colleagues? Because oftentimes we want to navigate the conversation in a way that feels good to us, but we also want to honor and respect the other person. Sometimes we really want to have privacy in terms of what we share. And oftentimes also, which is related to the next line, these conversations are emotionally draining. They can really be taxing. And so how do we navigate that in a way that's helpful to us rather than harmful to us? Another thing that often comes up for folks is changes or impacts on intimate relationships or insecurities that folks might experience as a result of the cancer diagnosis or a result of treatment or surgery. Financial strain that can arise from medical bills or from impacts of insurance, which goes down to my next one of insurance frustrations. And insurance can be incredibly frustrating in terms of dealing with them and making sure that everything is covered or covered as much as possible. Stress related to FMLA or time off, just the paperwork and making sure everything is filled out correctly can be incredibly frustrating. And And then also making sure that when you're talking to the medical team, am I getting all of the information I should be getting? Is the information all accurate? Am I up to date? Do I feel good about these conversations that I'm having with the team? Are we having really collaborative decision making, but where I am the center of those decision points? I'm really feeling in control of my own treatment. Do I feel like I can trust my treatment team, right? Or do I feel like they're not really on my side? Or do I feel like a number sometimes? All of those kinds of questions or concerns can come up. And related to my trust in the team or feeling about my treatment decision making is also, do I feel confident in communicating the thoughts or worries that I have? Do I feel confident in communicating needs or updates about my symptoms? All of those kinds of things. And then potentially related to my medical condition, but also potentially related to treatment. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I feeling really tired during the day? Am I in a lot of pain? Do I have a lot of nausea? And then also associated with treatment potentially is dealing with physical changes. Has my body changed? Have I had to get surgery and therefore have a different kind of image of myself that comes up with that? And another thing that often arises is being expected to be the same person before and after a diagnosis or during treatment or after treatment, when oftentimes we have changed. And what does that look like? And thanks for the feedback. And then do I want to hold on to who I used to be, or am I feeling good about those changes? And so a changed sense of self that comes along with it. So those are just some common challenges that I really wanted to name and put out there because I think they're all incredibly important. But that being said, I also wanted to open up the floor. This goes back to what both Kirsten and I had mentioned at the very beginning, which is the fact that this is being recorded right now. So anything that you do share is recorded. So whatever you feel comfortable sharing is okay. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's fine. But I will once in a while open up the floor to if anybody wants to volunteer any information. So I think my screen might be frozen, but there we go. Anybody want to name other challenges that they've experienced?
You can also feel free to put them in the chat and we'll just read them off.
I
Shift to the family dynamic. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, no, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt that. I kind of think you might have had something related, but there's just a challenge about, well, sometimes I will get people will say to me, oh, well, you don't look sick. And then all of a sudden it's like, then they don't have any appreciation of when they're not seeing me, I could be flat on my back, in high level of pain or something. It's that, oh, well, you don't look sick. It kind of diminishes for me that idea of, but I am really sick.
Yeah, that is huge and is really important. So I'm so glad that you bring that up because we all present differently to the world and we're read differently by the world because of how we present. And that by no means impacts how you're doing physically, right? Or is really should be impacting your own personal experience, but it's frustrating. It's sometimes sort of devaluing of one's own experience. And so then it comes up with those also interactions of how do I navigate with this person? Do I then have to try and justify my experience to this person? Do I just let it go? That a lot comes up with that. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
And then,
oh, go ahead.
So you saw the family dynamic issue, right? And I think that's particularly true in partners when you have a diagnosis that like totally knocks you out, and then so a lot of your daily living activities that normally you would be part of all of a sudden get shifted over to the other partner. And then when you're feeling better, you want to bring those back. It's like, please, actually, I would like to, I would like to do that thing that I always did because it makes me feel like I'm a part of everything. And then someone else said um, the challenge with how to shift with the changing current global health challenges with COVID and the changes and the ups and downs and the unknown that goes along with that. And then someone talks about dealing with regrets and how to minimize large regrets. People assuming because you're done with surgery and chemo that you're fine, want to be honest, but end up having to reassure others rather than being honest about ongoing issues.
Mm-hmm.
Having to take a lot of time off of work without pay, hadn't worked there very long with short-term disability was really stressful. Perseverance, balance with newfound mortality perspective. Oh man, that's a big one. So we got some great challenges here.
Yeah. And I want to respond a little bit to them. And a shift to the family dynamic can be across so many different directions. It can be horizontal in terms of partner relationships, but it can also be in terms of parent-child in either direction. And in terms of extended family. So I can really appreciate the levels that can come along with that. And then I also can acknowledge that we make decisions that we have the information for and try to make the best decision about in the moment, but sometimes have regret that comes after having made that treatment decision. And I can also acknowledge, all of these are really, really critical, especially in this time period that we're in with COVID. There are so many ups and downs, and it's hard to track, okay, is this going to be a safe time period? Because, for example, the last couple summers, the numbers went down, and the summer, it seems to be a little bit different. And so how do we navigate wanting to stay safe, wanting to protect those around us as well, but also get the social connection that helps us feel supported too. Dealing with regrets and how to minimize large regrets. Wanting biological children now because of the cancer cannot. That's a really heavy one for sure. People assuming that because you're done with surgery and chemo that you're fine, wanting to be honest, but end up having to almost reassure others rather than being honest about ongoing health issues. I think something that comes up a lot is in our interactions with others. There are assumptions that are made by the other person, or their stuff comes up in the conversation. And so it becomes more about their stuff than about the experience that the person who's experiencing the health condition might be having to take a lot of time off. That's really stressful financially. And stress and depression for what cancer has done to the body and ability to have children. Yeah, a lot of things that have been really impactful, and I really appreciate all of your vulnerability and sharing these with the group. If I missed anything, it is not because I did not think it was important. It's because sometimes my messaging jumps, and I apologize for that. I see also hair coming back differently. And that's something that I hear often is hair coming back differently, whether it be a different color, a different texture. Yeah. But again, if I missed a message, I apologize.
There was one that seems to be kind of skipped over, was the mortality.
Thank you.
The perspective on mortality.
Yeah. And how that changes across prior to getting a diagnosis, after getting a diagnosis, while going through treatment, new information that you get while going through treatment or after treatment, all really hard challenges. Yeah. Well, thank you all for your vulnerability and for your sharing. And the reason I started with the challenges is because These are all challenges that are faced within this context. And what comes with challenge and what comes with difficult life circumstances is stress. And that's part of what we're talking about today. So if my PowerPoint decides to, there we go, decides to cooperate, which it did, which is wonderful. Part of what I wanted to talk to you about, and I don't have as much time spent on stress because I think I wanted to focus more on resilience. We're going to address this a bit here. One, I want to say that stress has a pretty bad rap. It has a bad connotation, but actually it can be a positive thing. I might be that random person that's saying something and you're like, what in the world? I don't agree with that. Just give me a little bit of a platform to say why I think that's the case. One is stress physiologically and psychologically is our body and mind's reaction to a challenge. And so it is our ability to reach to the expectations or demands of that challenge. There are some really interesting TED Talks about stress and how physiologically, there's one TED Talk in particular about physiologically stress has a very similar like framework compared to joy. It's really our perception of it. So if anybody is interested in any links to TED Talks associated with stress, I would be more than happy to pass them out. I would probably ask Kirsten if you would be willing to pass that along. But if I see interest of that, I would be more than happy to send that along. I see some thumbs up, so I will definitely pass that along. So what should I be paying attention to? How do I know if I'm feeling stressed? Sometimes if people are like, well, I know if I'm feeling stressed, and oftentimes we do, but sometimes there are signs that we don't necessarily realize are associated with stress. So I wanted to name those as well. We can feel overwhelmed. We can feel oftentimes energetic, like, okay, I got to get this done, or I'm going to get this done. That's the more positive aspect of stress, where, for example, if you have a big deadline that you need to get a bunch of stuff done, you're going to feel stressed, but you're also going to feel a bit more energetic, maybe panicked, and motivated to complete those activities. And so again, stress can be a positive thing for motivation and production. Sometimes you can also feel irritable or nervous or afraid. And you might experience change in what you previously enjoyed. So maybe something that you used to love to do, you don't love to do it quite as much as the same as what you used to. Also, you might see physical signs or impacts of stress, like aches and pains, or any difficulty sleeping, having chest pain or indigestion, sometimes constipation, or on the other end of the spectrum, diarrhea, weight gain or weight loss, and fatigue. Any questions about stress before we move on to the next one? Okay. So then that leads me to the question of how are stress and resilience related? Well, resilience is adapting to that stress or that challenging experience through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility. And we're going to talk more in detail today about what exactly that means. But resilience also requires that we're aware of and we respond to both internal and external demands. What do I mean by that? Basically, I mean that externally, so environmentally, there may be things going on that we need to rise to the challenge for. So for example, that might mean going to a lot of medical appointments or having to go through treatment or having to have difficult conversations. Whereas internal demands might be having really difficult thoughts or feelings, right, that come up with these circumstances. And how do we sort of process those and navigate those in a way that we can understand our experience in a more fruitful way, in a more helpful way, and then relate to our experience in a more positive way or helpful way. So I wanted to ask and open up the floor here of how do you define resilience for yourself?
I'll jump in. I feel as though resilience is your ability to bounce back. So not just after a big life event, but after a hard day or after bad news, right? Like, how can we take what we've been through and experienced, processed that, and then move forward instead of like getting stuck? That's
Yeah, sorry, I love that. I love like bouncing back, and regardless of whether it's a sort of frustration that's on a smaller level or a really big life event, that we're able to use that, learn from it, and move forward in a beneficial way. Yeah. And I see another person who mentioned not getting stuck, moving through it. Yeah. I don't think I got another one, so I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything.
Yep,
I
there
mean,
was the can and cancer was one that somebody just said.
oh, good. Thank you.
I love that.
Yeah.
The ability to recognize what I can control and what I can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And then finding ways to be happy even though what you're going through is tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I made my chat larger because I keep missing things. So hopefully that'll help. So I apologize for that. But yeah, all of those are awesome. And I really appreciate that there are so many different ways of viewing resilience. And it can mean different things for different people, and how this helps you move forward. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, I just saw another one come up, looking for positive aspects. So what I hear in that is looking for like the silver lining of the situation. Something that comes up really in terms of, I'm going to say it, the literature as common factors of resilience, but also more clinically, what is impacting resilience is having effective emotion regulation. So what do I mean by that? Basically, I mean that when things get hard, when we're upset, when we're stressed, when we're overwhelmed or really sad, how do we manage what's going on for us internally? Another thing that comes up as a factor of resilience is an internal locus of control. So that basically means that I can have an impact on my life. I can have an impact on how I'm feeling or the kind of treatment I'm getting. I feel some level of control. And I appreciate what Tim said, which was ability to recognize what I can control and what I can't control. Because I agree that there are going to be things in life that we can't control. And so we have to acknowledge that those exist and that we aren't able to change those. And also there are going to be things in our life that we can control. And so this is where the internal locus of control comes in, of those things that I can control. I believe in myself and my ability to have an impact on those. Yeah. And then problem solving skills. So am I able to think through situations? Do I have good communication skills? Am I able to plan well? All of those kinds of things. Self-compassion. So when I mess up, when I make mistakes, when I have failures, how am I showing up for myself? Am I criticizing myself, or am I showing myself sort of forgiveness and self-love? And then social support. So this is one that can't be understated, or is, I'm getting into the negatives, but basically I cannot say enough how important social support is. And that brings us back to the COVID dynamic of the situation, where it makes it a bit trickier than maybe it used to be, because of trying to stay safe and potentially trying to social distance. How do we make sure that we get access to our social support in a way that feels safe to us? And then the survivor mentality. So how can I do this? I'm able to do this. I'm going to beat this. Or I have people who have my back who will help me beat this. And so am I coming from a I can't do this, or I don't have hope? Or am I coming from a place of, this is really hard, I'm not going to have that toxic positivity where this is fine, everything is fine, and this is all great. but rather this is hard and I can do this. Does that distinction make sense? Because I think someone said something earlier that made me think about the problem of toxic positivity. Have you guys heard of that phrase before? So I'll just mention what toxic positivity is, but basically toxic positivity is when we're sharing how we're feeling, and more often sharing difficult thoughts or feelings, or sharing difficult life circumstances. And the person responds by saying, it's fine, it's going to be okay. You're a fighter, you'll get through this. And I think there are positive aspects to hearing somebody say those things, but not when they negate the difficulty or when they make it so that they're invalidating the challenge. And so that's the difference between toxic positivity and a both and of this is hard and we'll get through this together. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to move forward. So with those factors in mind, how do we build our resilience? And that's not a general question, but that's sort of framing where we're headed. So the first thing, because of how important social support is prioritizing relationships. And relationships, in terms of the quantity, is less important than compared to the quality. So if you have people who really have your back, who are really in your corner, who support you in the way that you desire to be supported, because that looks different for different people, that's what really matters, rather than you have a bunch of people who reach out, right? So really having those strong networks. And something that comes up in conversations with folks is, I don't really know how to accept support right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed by like the offers of help, and I don't really know what to say or what to do in receiving that help. And so I think that is an important conversation too, of how do we accept help and how do we potentially delegate receipt of help. So sometimes it can be helpful to have what we call a point person, or somebody in our life who can sort of coordinate those kinds of things of maybe at this time I'm feeling really poorly, and so a meal train would be awesome, right? But I don't have the energy to coordinate a meal train right now. So is maybe Kathy, my friend Kathy, can Kathy coordinate the meal train? Or there's also things like financial support of I'm having a lot of bills come up, and maybe there are folks in my life who are able to provide financial support. That's potentially another kind of option. So I've mentioned practical support. That's one form of social support. And that's again like meal trains or other kind of logistical things. Can someone bring me to the appointments? Can someone help with rides? Those kinds of things. Can someone pick up my medicine if they're allowed to? And then there's the financial support, and then there's also emotional support. So I think the important thing about this one is that we're not having those emotional conversations with somebody who is having that toxic positivity, and with somebody who ends up making the conversation about them. You had mentioned that earlier, of we end up having to sort of reassure that other person, or sort of go into their concerns. Are you really receiving the kind of social support that you're hoping for? Are you really being heard and seen by that other person? And so figuring out who in your life might fill that role. And sometimes it's not the person you would expect, and sometimes they're not in the stereotypical role of who you might expect. Like it might not be a spouse, it might not be a friend, it might be somebody else. And so making sure for you that you have those in your life that are really able to fill the role that you're hoping them to fill, or the role that you need. And that can change over time, because at one moment you might need some practical support, but in other moments you might need more emotional support. Any thoughts or questions related to that?
I think that's really great and really important. I also think that one thing to keep in mind is you need to be able to identify who those people are and what their strengths are. because sometimes we go to that practical person looking for emotional support, and they love us so much, but man, they just don't have it. And so I think it's important to recognize that just because you're not getting something from somebody that you're asking does not mean that they don't care. It just means maybe it's just not part of their makeup. And that's hard to suss out sometimes.
Yeah, that's an incredibly important point where they might have certain strengths. We all have certain strengths and weaknesses. We're not all amazing at everything. And so they might be, like you said, a really wonderful practical support person, but they might not be the best at providing empathetic support. And so knowing who those people are, and rather that saying anything about your relationship or what that means in terms of how they care about you, it's really just one of their strengths and weaknesses, and that's okay. But knowing for yourself that that's probably not the person you're going to go to for emotional support if you're needing emotional support. Yeah. Anything else? So I see Scarlett wrote, I was very lucky when I learned that I would need help for at least a week after surgery. My brothers would do anything, but I needed help from female friends. A friend who is normally very introverted called and asked if she could coordinate care, overnight help, and food. Yeah. So that's awesome that you had someone who, it sounds like, was really able to provide practical support in a variety of ways and really, really was able to support you in that time period that you needed it. That's awesome. Okay. Anybody else want to share before I move forward? Okay. If I go forward and you're like, hey, actually, I wanted to share, just start talking and I'll stop talking. Okay. Okay. So I had this question, but what are some things that you're already doing or what might you consider trying in order to build or mobilize your social support system? The reason I put this up as a question for you all is because, one, I think it's generally an important question, but two, we're in a really hard social context where COVID exists and it can feel like we're all seeing each other through screens often, and that may not always meet people's needs. So sometimes it can be really helpful for sharing of ideas, where maybe somebody else has a strategy that they've used and it's been really awesome for them. And then other people can use it too. So has anybody had any methods of mobilizing or building their social support system that has been particularly helpful?
This is Christine. So I actually, I work at the Foundation for Black Women's Wellness, and Kirsten knows me. We go way back. But we actually implemented a Cancer Thriver Circle here at the foundation. So we have a hybrid option. So we have our TV monitor right here for folks who want to join us virtually. And then I need to fix the tables, but we have this big space where everyone is 6 feet apart. We wear our masks when they're here. So it's like we can still be together however that looks, however we're feeling. But then when we are here in person, we're taking those safety precautions to make sure everyone feels really safe and comfortable. And selfishly, I created this because I needed it. So it was really great to be able to have this space for support for other people who did as well. So
that sounds like an awesome space and just a variety of ways to bring people together in a way that feels safe for them. That's wonderful. Looks like I got a message. Joining a support group at Gilda's, and then trying to help others that have or may have gone through a similar situation, taking advantage of virtual opportunities, doing a lot of outdoor activities with your dog. Awesome. Another thing that has come up is Immerman's Angels. Has anybody ever heard of Immerman's Angels? So Immerman's Angels is an organization that connects you to somebody who has been through something really similar. So usually they connect you to like similar gender and potentially similar cancer and similar experience so that you can sort of process that together and just have somebody that you can talk through that with. So just so you know, that is another option that exists as well. It's called Immerman's Angels. And I believe that's a national database, but I'm not sure. So that would likely
It's
be
actually an
Rachel.
international database, and they have actually, I know the founder, and they were able to connect someone who had a super rare cancer with someone else who happened to live in Denmark, like a a Chicago Denmark connection.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And I did want to, just for people who maybe are still in that, I need support kind of space, just remind everybody about My Lifeline, which is part of the cancer support community, part of our network. And it's kind of like care pages where you can keep people updated, but you can also go in and schedule supporters. So if you have all of those super duper awesome practical people that, you need rides to places, you need meals, you need somebody to get your kids to soccer, you need, somebody to walk your dog. You can schedule those things. And I actually know someone who used it when she was during her cancer treatment, but then re-engaged with it when she had a car accident and needed to paint her apartment because she was moving, and she couldn't do it because she was in a cast. It was like, that was the best use of that site. So it's called My Lifeline, and it is amazing.
Awesome. That does sound amazing. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay. So those are some other examples or options. Both, it sounds like locally, but also internationally. So that's very neat. I'm actually writing My Lifeline down because I did not know about that site. So I want to make sure that I have that moving forward for folks. So that's why I'm looking down. Okay. I'm going to move forward with the slide once it okay. So we talked a bit about social support and social connectedness being really important for our resilience, but so is a sense of purpose. I'm just going to move the chat up because it looks like I got something. Thank you for sending that along, that link. So what is a sense of purpose or my sense of purpose? That's different for everybody. Everybody has different values and what sort of is their compass for how they want to live their lives. But figuring out maybe what are things that you can do on a daily basis or a weekly basis that can provide you with a sense of accomplishment or a sense of meaning, or things that build your sense of confidence. Setting clear, achievable goals can be particularly helpful. So I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of the phrase SMART goals. Does everybody know what a SMART goal is? So I'm seeing some head nods and some head shakes. So basically, SMART goals are about how do we set a goal that is going to be the most helpful for us, and the most likely that we are to achieve that goal. SMART is sort of an acronym that we use to help remember what that goal is, where in this case, for S stands for specific. So I don't want to say like this random thing, if I'm going to get in shape, that's not, let's say exercise were my goal, or not my goal, but around the subject of what I wanted to do. I'll do a specific example here. I wouldn't want to say I want to get in shape. That's way too vague. It doesn't make me hold any kind of accountability. So I would want it to be specific. I would want to have action words. M is for measurable. So can I tell whether I'm actually doing it or not? Am I actually achieving what I set out to achieve? So I'm going to get more and more detailed with my description of my exercise plan or goal as we get through this. And then achievable. So I don't want to go from 0 to 100, where maybe I am out of shape and I have not been to the gym in a few months. And then I'm like, I'm going to run a marathon in 2 months. No, you're not, Olivia. That's not going to happen. So don't do that to yourself. You're going to end up losing confidence, and it's not going to be a positive experience. And then R. So R, depending upon the article you read, stands for different things. But sometimes it's realistic, sometimes it's relevant. I'm going to stick with relevant because does it make sense to you? Does it make sense for your life context right now? I'm going to use that for R. And then T is time bound. So we want to specify in what time period are we trying to make this goal happen. So again, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So in the case of exercising, I might say, I am going to attempt to jog. So maybe starting with a walk and then going to a run 3 times per week for 1 mile, right? And so it's specific. I'm saying what kind of exercise that I'm going to do. It's measurable because it's a mile and I mentioned 3 times. It's achievable because I could be walking at first and that's okay. And then relevant, in this case, I made it as part of my goal. It was important to me and it was time bound because I said that it's going to be 3 times per week. You could even say, go a little bit further, that I'll get to, for example, a 5K within 2 to 3 months, right? Everyone good with me there on what SMART goals are? Okay. So figuring out for yourself, what is the thing that provides you with a sense of accomplishment or meaning? And would it be appropriate to set a SMART goal with it to help you sort of engage in that activity or plan? And I see Tony had mentioned a sense of meaning, being able to relax and enjoy the outdoors with my family and dog every night. So being able to have that sounds like really wonderful leisure time together. Yeah. Okay. So anyone have any activities or tasks that give you a sense of meaning or enjoyment or success? And you would like to share? Tony had shared one and I appreciate, oh, I just saw that was a direct message. I'm sorry if I wasn't supposed to say that, Tony. I apologize if that was supposed to be just to me. I will pay better attention to that moving forward. Part of the reason I also want to name is that it's important to have feelings of both meaning and success, and you probably won't get both from the same activities, and that's okay. But both of those are really important for mental health. And so thinking through for yourself, what are the activities or tasks that give you both enjoyment and meaning, but also success, and that it's okay if they're not the same. Okay. Thank you for your grace, Tony. I appreciate that. And then Lori mentioned making gifts to family of genealogy work. Nice. And listening to the call map. I think the call map, I've heard wonderful things about the call map. It has some wonderful meditations that people use. And actually I will loop that back in later because it's going to be when we talk about different coping skills. And then another app that people really enjoy is Headspace. I've heard good things about Headspace as well. Volunteering with social support organizations that makes a difference in the lives of people. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm gonna.
So Olivia, there was a question that came up
Oh, yeah,
a little bit that got missed, and it was about managing one's, and she used the word failure, but I think it's like, how do you process the whole thing when you set a goal and then you don't make it and then you don't get it, and just like, like when you set yourself up and then you don't make it, and it happens over and over and over.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I apologize for missing that question. And thank you for bringing that up, that I missed that question. And that's an awesome question. So there are multiple things that I hear when I hear that question. So I'm going to break it down a little bit.
Mhm.
One part that I hear is some judgment to the self of that it's a failure. I also hear that what comes with consistently not meeting goals is often a lowered self-confidence of I don't know if I'm going to be able to meet a SMART goal, or I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this, or that I am somebody who meets my goals. And so that often impacts how we feel about even the goals that we're setting. And so what I might try is a couple things. One being sort of take a step back and see why you're setting those goals for yourself. Are they really values based, or are they a should? That's usually a good place to start. Because if it's a should and it's not a want to or mean something to me, then we're less likely to do it. And then I would also see how many SMART goals are you trying to attain at the same time, because we only have so many resources that we can use at once, whether that be our energy or our time or our emotions or our finances. And so I'm really trying to prioritize what is going to be important to me. And then making sure that the SMART goals you do set are ones that are going back to, am I able to attain it? Because if we're setting the bar super high for ourselves, we're not going to be able to meet it. And then we're going to be hard on ourselves when we don't meet it. So really creating sort of a stepwise approach of am I able to meet that next step? So something that comes up for myself as a fellow human and for other fellow humans is wanting to do more, but am I realistically able to do it? And so what I like to think about is, what is my baseline? What is happening right now? And then maybe the goal that I have down the line is much higher than that, but that's not my first goal. My first goal might be 10% more than what I'm doing right now, because that is actually achievable. So I answered in a few different ways. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, of course. Okay, let's see what else we got. And Shelby had mentioned writing it out. Another thing that's actually pretty impactful is writing out SMART goals. Research actually does show that we're more likely to achieve whatever goal it is if we actually write it out rather than just name it. Another thing that impacts it is if we talk to somebody else about it, because then we sort of have that social contingency in place of they know about it. So if I'm not doing that thing, they can call me out on it. Not in a negative way, but in a sort of collaborative, I have somebody who has my back kind of way.
And having that support crew.
Yeah, exactly.
We all do better when we have a support crew.
And then I joined my dog trainer's Can I Fitness challenge and saw my desire to be active. It was fun and gave me guidance on how to move forward with adding fitness in. I'm having fun and I can feel how strong my body is now. It's also helped with my mental health. So we're having some awesome positives. And I also want to say that exercise is usually not automatically reinforcing, meaning like if we're out of shape, it's not going to feel good at first. It's going to be hard. Our body's going to be sore. So there are a lot of things that require a shift in our behavior that usually don't feel good at first. And so getting past the initial routine hump can be difficult. Yeah, pairing steps with other habits or other routines. A couple books. This is not what you asked, but I'm going to give you put out a few books. Atomic Habits is a really good book that I recently listened to the audiobook. And it's about how to set up your environment in a way. Oh, nice. Lisa also read it. That is make you more likely to complete a goal, or how do you pair it with other things that you do already that makes you more likely to. Okay, so I'm going to move forward if that's okay with everybody. Cool. The next is taking care of yourself. And this is sort of I'm going to go into a jargon area for a second, and then I'm going to come back out. So there are what we call setting events, which basically means when we do them or when we don't do them, we have higher levels or lower levels of stress. And this is the case for anybody. So if we are not hydrated, instead of our baseline level of stress being down here, it's actually up here. So anything that happens during our day that causes our stress, it's going to be higher than we would have been otherwise if we were well hydrated. It's a weird one. People are like, really, how hydrated I am impacts how stressed I am, but it does. So being well hydrated is important. Eating a well balanced diet, so that provides you with the nutrition that you need. I think there are also going to be times, going back to what we talked about earlier, where if we're nauseous or we're not feeling well, that it's hard to get that nutrition in. And so working with your team, setting events. Working with your team on how do I get enough nutrition in my body so that I can really be well equipped to handle what comes about in my day. Another thing is, am I getting enough sleep? No matter who you are, if you are not getting enough sleep, you're going to have a harder time managing stress or managing life circumstances that arise. There's a couple other ones that are really specific that I didn't put on there, but I'm going to just mention. If we are really hot or really cold, it tends to impact our mood. That's another one. Also, hunger, it's societally talked about, but it's real. If we are hungry, we are more likely to be irritable or sad. And then moving our body, and that might look differently for different people or for each of us, depending upon how we're doing or how we're feeling, and that's okay. So one day maybe we have enough energy for a walk, and maybe another day we have enough energy for stretching, but doing whatever you can within what you feel like is your restriction. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So then this is, excuse me, about developing your coping skills. Yep, exactly. Doing what you can when you can. And giving yourself compassion associated with that, because it'll look different on any given day, and that's okay. For coping skills actually is the umbrella term. I've been trying to avoid the sun, but it's coming for me. So coping skills is an umbrella term that has multiple different types that fall under it. They are emotion focused, they are situation focused, and avoidance or distraction are the three main types of coping skills. I'm going to break that down a little bit. So what is emotion focused coping? Basically, emotion focused coping is about the emotional experience. So I'm feeling something that I don't like to feel, or I'm feeling something that's more intense than I would like to feel it. So let's say I'm feeling really sad or I'm feeling really angry. How do I bring that sadness or that anger or that anxiety down from a 10 to a 2, or maybe even a 10 to a 4? That is what emotion focused coping is all about. Everyone with me so far? Okay. So I had opened this up and I'm going to start off by giving some options. And then I am going to open up to the floor to see if anybody else has anything they would like to add. So one example that people use is diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is a very helpful emotion-focused coping skill. I also teach diaphragmatic breathing when I'm working with people who have nausea or who have pain or who have sleep difficulties, because diaphragmatic breathing is one of the exercises that has the biggest bang for your buck. If you know it, you can use it across a lot of situations. And so when I'm teaching people different skills, I start with those because you can use it in a variety of contexts. Another thing that's important about any of the coping skills, particularly the coping skills that are emotion focused, is using them as often as possible, so daily, Because, for example, let's say I'm learning how to play piano. If I don't practice in between my piano lessons, when I go back to the teacher, they're going to be like, Olivia, what were you doing all week? You are not doing a great job, right? Versus if I had practiced in between my lessons, they might say, wow, you must have practiced. You're playing beautifully, right? Same thing for emotion-focused coping skills, where if we aren't practicing them, we're not going to become fluent in them. We're not going to be confident in our ability to use them when the need does arise. So in order to increase our confidence, increase our fluency, and increase our effectiveness at using the skill, it's really important to practice outside of those stressful contexts or outside of the pain contexts. Another thing that's really important about emotion-focused coping skills is that if we're using them on a daily basis, they have the added benefit, besides increasing our confidence and effectiveness, to what we call activate our parasympathetic nervous system. So we have a variety of aspects of our nervous system, but the parasympathetic nervous system is basically the part of our nervous system that helps us relax or calm down. And so if we are activating it with a variety of strategies, that will allow our baseline level of stress to reduce. Okay. So really important to practice these as often as possible. So as I mentioned, diaphragmatic breathing is an exercise that you can practice. Meditation using, someone mentioned the Calm app or using Headspace. Those are two really good options. Progressive muscle relaxation is another really effective strategy for pain, as well as for sleep difficulties, as well as stress. So you could probably look up on Google progressive muscle relaxation on YouTube. They often have those guided. There's also guided imagery that is usually really helpful. There's so many different guided imagery options on there. Some people are like, I hate going to the beach. I don't want to have a guided imagery where they take me to the beach. So then maybe go to the forest. There are a lot of different options. I also want to give a shout out to a website. And then I want to mention, you had shared, Kirsten, that you offer guided imagery and relaxation classes on Wednesday at noon. So that's another wonderful option. There's also a free mindfulness 8-week course. I am shocked that it's still free, by one of the founders of mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it's, I'll make sure I send that to Kirsten after our class, but it's called Palaus Mindfulness. And they have so many different body scans, and they have so many different meditations, and even yoga for those who like it. So I would highly recommend checking that out as an option too. Okay. Nice, Tony. Thank you for sharing mindfulness app. So I think because of time, if everyone's okay with it, I'll probably go on, excuse me, to the next one. And then if we have time at the end to open it up, does that sound okay to everybody? Okay. Let's see what we got here. So I said, let's practice. If we have time at the end, we'll practice one of the skills. So the next question is, what is situation-focused coping? Situation-focused coping is basically trying to manage the stressful situation to reduce the source or sources of stress. So it's different from emotion-focused coping because we're not paying attention to our emotions really about it. We notice that we don't like the way we feel about it. We notice the stress potentially, but it's not about that. It's about how do we manage the situation. And there are different types of situation-focused coping. Again, I opened it up to the floor, but I'm going to name some options and different strategies that you can use for situation-focused coping. So for situation-focused coping, it's a sort of, again, that umbrella term where things fall under it, but planning and being able to think through different events that can happen and scheduling of events. So knowing when you're going to appointments and making sure that you don't sort of double book yourself. having somebody who is that point person, like we talked about earlier, who is able to coordinate, support, those kinds of things are considered situation focused coping. Communication skills. I'm getting in the shadows and then a really bright light. So I'm just going to turn on my light over here if I can. That didn't really do anything, I don't think. But basically, again, things that can help with the situation. So as we talked about earlier, we had described situations where we're having these conversations. Usually they're emotionally draining, and it's not feeling particularly helpful to me. So maybe are there any communication skills that I can learn that'll help set boundaries or help communicate that what somebody is doing is not particularly helpful? So specific communication skills. And I would say that that is probably a lecture for itself. There are so many different communication skills that would be particularly important and relevant in this context. So that I'm just putting out that would be a potential for another day. Well, thank you. So again, situation, really focusing on what's going on in the context, and not paying as much attention to really how we're feeling about it. So a lot, I imagine, of things that you've been doing already to manage your care and to sort of interact with others around what's been going on. And then finally, avoidance or distraction. So avoidance has a really bad rep, where like you shouldn't avoid, they're an avoider, like those kinds of language. And I would say that sometimes avoidance can be bad, but sometimes avoidance can be really helpful. So for example, if someone is getting a blood draw, or if somebody is getting a procedure for which they're awake, having something that's a distraction is usually very helpful. Another thing that is helpful is, for example, the night before surgery, I am not going to have you use like all of the problem solving skills in the world and all of the emotion focused skills in the world. Like, yes, if you have already learned some emotion focused coping skills, implementing those the night before surgery, if you're nervous about it, will be helpful. But I'll also talk you through different strategies for avoidance or distraction, because getting through that night and making it to the next day is going to be important. So that might mean having a visual blocker when getting your blood drawn if you're not a fan of pokes. That might mean having a preferred TV show, or something going on, a conversation with somebody that's particularly distracting when something's happening. That might mean the night before surgery, can I have my favorite like goodie with somebody earlier in the day when I can still eat? Does that mean doing like watching show with my spouse and enjoying that with them before surgery? So again, avoidance has a bad rap, but it's not always a bad thing. So it's really about, are you using it wisely? When I see folks getting into trouble is when avoidance is all they use. So for example, if there are a lot of stressors and somebody is like scrolling through social media a lot or watching a lot of TV, and they're not managing the situation, or they're not learning how to like sort of process their emotions or manage their emotions, that's when it's more problematic. And I would say, okay, like there are going to be times where I want you to distract and I want you to avoid, but there are also going to be times where it's going to be really helpful for you to learn how to use emotion focused skills or situation focused skills. And so how can we diversify what skills you're using? And so it's not about avoidance being a bad thing. It's about needing to diversify those coping skills. And so if you didn't get anything else out of tonight's lecture, I want to really express how important it is to have a diversity of coping skills, and even under each category, because eventually watching TV, if that's your go-to, is gonna get old. Diaphragmatic breathing, if that's your go-to, is gonna get old. And so having different options under each category is really key. Okay. Any questions about that or concerns about that?
I think that's really great. And I really think of all of that the pieces that you were talking about um, as tools. And I use that phrase a lot. It's like, okay, so what's in our toolbox
Mhm.
and what do we need to pull out at different times? Because sometimes avoidance can be a hammer and you don't need a hammer. Right now, I just need a screwdriver, to put it all together. So using the right tool at the right time can be really important.
Exactly. And I like that, using the right tool at the right time. And
Mhm.
and that's part of the, I think, science, but also art of coping skills, is figuring out what is going to be the most helpful in this given moment. And that might mean playing with it. That might mean trying to use an emotion focused coping skill first and being like, nope, that didn't work. And so then can I use a distraction and then come back to the emotion focused coping skill so that I can then problem solve,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It's playing with it and figuring it out.
Yep. And
Okay.
someone did mention how important it is to be your own advocate to help you continue to feel like you're in, with the coping. So you continue to feel like you have somewhat of control of your situation. So that was an
Mhm.
important addition.
For sure, definitely. I'm seeing a message. Selfcompassion.org has meditation exercises that are helpful in being good and kind to yourself. Thank you for sharing that. I like that. Anything else anybody wanted to say or share in response to the different types of coping? Okay.
Looks like we're good.
So interestingly enough, the next subject was self-compassion. And it's about being kind and understanding to ourselves when we make mistakes or we fail or we experience challenges, instead of criticizing ourselves. And oftentimes, the first step in self-compassion is noticing when we're being unkind to ourselves. So we have a lot of thoughts that run through our mind throughout any given day and even any moment. And we oftentimes have a lot of thoughts that we don't even notice that we're having. And oftentimes those thoughts are negative. And so learning how to point out, ooh, that wasn't very kind to myself, or ooh, I had that kind of thought again. That can be a way to give yourself some power and control back around noticing and then trying to challenge them. So for example, let's say somebody had thoughts of, going back to that gym example, I haven't made it to the gym again, like I'm a failure, or I'm never going to be able to do this, right? Uh, those are negative thoughts that might come up for somebody who had the goal of going to the gym regularly. Now we might challenge those and say, oh, I noticed that I'm having that thought. I noticed I had the thought of I'm a failure. Or I noticed the fact that I had the thought of I'm not going to be able to do this. And you can say, yeah, I didn't go today, right? Name the fact. I didn't go today. And also that doesn't mean I'm a failure. I can still go tonight. I can go tomorrow morning. I can set out my shoes near the door, or my gym equipment near the door, so that I'm more likely to do it, whether again in the morning or the next day. Okay. So I had a self-compassion exercise that we could do, but I wanted to check in with the room about what would be most helpful considering the time. So it's 6:14. We are meeting, I believe, until 6:30. So would it be most helpful to do one of the emotion focused exercises that I can pull out? Or would it be most helpful to do a self-compassion exercise? Or would you like to ask questions? And I believe that's the end of my slides. So I'm gonna open it up so I can see you all. And if you wanted to